My name is Caroline Johansson. I'm 28 years old. And for 3 years, my parents called every single employer I applied to and told them I had a criminal record. I didn't. I've never been arrested. I've never even gotten a parking ticket. But by the time I was 27, I was living in a homeless shelter, washing my hair in a gas station sink, and eating just one meal a day because no one within a 50-mile radius would hire me. My dad would text me once a week, the exact same message, every time. Come home and apologize, and maybe I'll stop. Then one Tuesday morning, a woman knocked on the shelter door and said 7 words that changed everything. Your grandma hired me to find you. Before I explain what was inside that briefcase, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. I always enjoy seeing where people are listening from. Now let me take you back to Harlem, Ohio. The week after my 25th birthday, the day I decided I was finished asking permission to live my own life. Harlem, Ohio. Population about 4,000 people. 1 grocery store, 1 high school, 1 diner that has been serving the same meatloaf since 1987. The kind of town where everyone waves from their front porch and everyone knows whose truck is parked somewhere it shouldn't be. The Johanssons, that's us. We were seen as decent people. My dad, Gerald, worked as a plant manager at the Harlan manufacturing facility for 19 years before it shut down. My mom, Denise, volunteered at the community food drive every Thanksgiving. On paper, we were the kind of family people pointed at and said, "See, that's how you raise a daughter." Behind our front door, things followed a very different set of rules. I didn't have my own house key until I was 20. I wasn't allowed to drive more than 10 miles away without calling ahead first. When I was 14 and started bussing tables at the Route 30 diner after school, making minimum wage, and nothing fancy, my paychecks went straight into a joint bank account my mom opened for safety. I never saw a statement. I never questioned it. That's simply how things were done. I graduated valedictorian, the top student in my class. I had a guidance counselor who pulled me aside during my senior year and said, "Caroline, you could get scholarships, real ones." I brought the brochures home. My dad didn't even open them. He placed them on the kitchen counter and said, "College is for people who can't work with their hands." So I stayed. I cleaned, I cooked, I mowed the lawn and helped my mom in the garden. Every night at dinner I listened to my dad talk about how the world was falling apart. And every night he would look at me across the table and say the same line. "You have a roof, food, and family. What more does a girl your age need?" For a long time, I didn't have an answer. The week after I turned 25, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big fight or emotional breakdown. I was standing in the kitchen scrubbing the same cast iron skillet I had been scrubbing since I was 12 years old. And suddenly a thought hit my mind like a rock through a window. I'm going to be 40 years old, standing in this exact spot, doing this exact same thing. That thought scared me more than anything my dad had ever said. The next morning I walked to the Harlem Public Library. I sat down at one of the public's computers in the back row, the ones with sticky keyboards and a 15-minute time limit. I created a new email address, not the shared family one my mom monitored, a new one, just mine. I found a job listing for a hardware store in Millfield, about 20 minutes east. They needed a sales associate, full-time, 9 to 5. Benefits after 90 days. I typed up my application slowly using 2 fingers and hit send, before I could talk myself out of it. 2 days later, an email came back. They wanted to interview me. Thursday at 10 in the morning. I read that email 3 times. Then I closed the browser and walked home with my hands shaking, not from fear, from something I hadn't felt in years. I think it was hope. That night, at dinner, something felt strange. My dad sat at the head of the table, fork in one hand, his newspaper folded beside his plate. He looked at me once, just once, with an expression I couldn't fully understand. My mom stood at the sink with her back toward both of us, washing dishes that were already clean. Nobody spoke a word. The next morning, I drove to Millfield for the interview. The manager shook my hand at the door. He smiled at first. Then he sat me down, and the smile slowly disappeared. His name was Bill, a man in his mid-50s with reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. He had my application printed out on the desk between us. "Caroline," he said, "I'm gonna be honest with you." "Okay," I replied. "Is there anything in your background we should know about?" I blinked. "No, sir, nothing." He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We received a phone call yesterday. Someone, I won't say who, mentioned a felony theft charge." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the armrest of my chair. "That's not true," I said quickly. "I've never been arrested. I've never stolen anything in my life." Bill looked at me and I could see it clearly. He wanted to believe me, but he also had a business to run and a phone call sitting in the back of his mind. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We can't move forward." I drove home in silence. No radio, no tears, just the white lines of Route 30 sliding past the windshield. When I pulled into the driveway, my dad was sitting on the porch with his newspaper open across his lap. He didn't even look up. "How was your day, sweetheart?" I stood there holding my keys, staring at the back of his newspaper. He slowly turned a page like nothing in the world was wrong. "Fine," I said. "Good," he replied. "Your mom made pot roast." I sat through dinner. Pot roast, green beans, iced tea. My mom talked about the neighbor's new fence. My dad nodded along like it was the most fascinating topic he had ever heard, and somewhere between the pot roast and the iced tea, a thought started forming in my mind. Small, ugly, and impossible. Did they know? I pushed the thought away. They were my parents. Parents don't do that, but I didn't push it away for long. Over the next 6 weeks, I applied to 3 more places: a grocery store in Ridgeway, a warehouse on the county line, a diner in Cooperton that needed someone for the morning shift. Only 3 places called me for interviews. All 3 canceled within 48 hours. The grocery store said the position had already been filled. The warehouse simply never called me back, but the diner was different. The owner, a woman named Pat, decided to be honest with me. She leaned across the counter and lowered her voice. "Honey, someone called here about you." My chest tightened. "What did they say?" "Said you had a criminal record," she replied. "Theft and fraud." "Was it a woman?" Pat nodded slowly. "Said she was a concerned neighbor." Concerned neighbor. That night, I waited until my parents went to bed. I quietly walked down the hallway to my mom's sewing room, the only room in the house that truly belonged to her. I opened the desk drawer and pushed aside fabric scraps and pincushions. And there it was. A small blue notebook. I opened it. My mom's handwriting. Careful and neat, the same cursive she used when writing birthday cards. Down the left column were names: Millfield Hardware, Ridgeway Fresh Mart, County Line Logistics, Cooperton Family Diner. Down the right column were red check marks, every single place I had applied to, checked off one by one. I stood in that dark room holding the notebook while the floor seemed to disappear under my feet. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. My mother had made a list. She was tracking me. I quietly placed the notebook back in the drawer, closed it, and walked to my room. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, turning one question over and over in my mind. How do you fight the people who are supposed to protect you? The next morning, I placed the blue notebook on the kitchen table. My mom was pouring coffee. My dad was buttering toast. The radio played an old country song in the background. Everything looked normal, completely ordinary. "Mom," I said, "explain. This." Denise looked down at the notebook. Her hand froze in the middle of pouring coffee. The coffee spilled onto the counter. Then the tears came. "But you went through my things," she said, her voice shaking. "Is this how I raised you? Going through your mother's private belongings?" "You called my employers," I replied. "Every single one. You told them I'm a criminal." I did it because I love you." She pressed her hand against her chest. "The world out there is dangerous. You have no idea what could happen to a girl alone. I'm 25, Mom. I'm not a girl." My dad slowly set his toast down. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. "We're protecting you, Caroline. You think you can survive out there. You can't even cook for yourself." "I've cooked every meal in this house since I was 16. He ignored that completely. "Drop this right now. I'm going to call the police." Gerald laughed softly through his nose. "And tell them what?" he said. "That your mom made a phone call? They'll laugh you out of the station." I looked at my mother, tears running down her cheeks, coffee still spreading across the counter. Then I looked at my father, calm as a quiet Sunday morning, buttering his second piece of toast like nothing in the world had happened. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. If I stayed in that house, I would never have a life of my own. "If you don't stop," I said quietly, "I'm going to leave." He didn't even blink. You walk out that door, you walk out with nothing. No money, no papers, nothing at all. I honestly thought he was bluffing. I thought he was just trying to scare me. But he wasn't bluffing. That night I packed my things. One small backpack, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my phone charger, and a photo of my grandmother that I always kept in my nightstand drawer. When I opened the front door, my mom was standing in the hallway with her arms crossed. Her face was dry now. The tears had disappeared, replaced by something much colder and harder. "If you leave," she said slowly, "you're dead to us." My dad stood behind her with his arms folded across his chest, filling the hallway like a wall. He didn't say a single word. He didn't have to. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened my banking app. Balance, $0. Years of paychecks, tip money from the diner, birthday cash from Grandma Maggie. Every dollar I had ever earned was gone. My mom had been on the account since I was 16. She didn't need my permission to remove anything. "I need my birth certificate," I said, "and my social security card." "Those belong to this house," my dad said from behind the screen door. Then he shut the door. I walked down the driveway at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. I had a backpack, a phone with 11% battery, and $12 cash in my back pocket. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a real plan. I didn't have anywhere to go. I walked to the gas station on Route 30 and sat on the curb under the bright fluorescent lights. A semi-truck pulled in and then left again. The cashier inside looked at me once through the window and then quickly looked away. At 11:16 p.m., my phone buzzed in my hand. A text message from my dad. "Come home. Apologize. I'll think about it." I turned the phone off. Not because I was brave, but because the battery was almost dead anyway. I had $12 and nowhere safe to sleep. But for the first time in 25 years, nobody was telling me where I had to go. I found the Harlan Community Shelter 2 days later. Actually, it was a woman at the gas station counter, the same one who had looked away that first night, who told me about it on my second morning of sleeping in the bathroom stall. She didn't ask questions. She simply wrote down an address on a napkin and quietly slid it across the counter. The shelter was a converted warehouse on Mill Street. It had 20 beds, a shared bathroom, and a small kitchen run by volunteers. The building smelled like strong industrial cleaner mixed with reheated soup. The fluorescent lights buzzed all night long. Linda Marsh ran the place. She was 47, had short hair and reading glasses that she kept pushing up her nose every few minutes. She didn't ask me why I was there. She handed me a towel and pointed toward bed 14. "You don't have to explain why you're here," she said. "You just have to want to stand up again." I was the youngest person in the shelter by at least 15 years. I started the long process of replacing my documents. I filed for a new birth certificate through the mail. 6 to 8 weeks, they said. I went to the DMV for a temporary ID, but without my social security card or any supporting papers, I was pushed into a backlog. "Come back in 3 weeks," they said. "Then come back again later." While I waited, I washed dishes at the shelter in exchange for an extra meal. I swept the floors every evening. I organized the supply closet and restocked the shelves. I needed to feel useful. I needed to keep moving forward. And I kept applying for jobs. This time I looked farther away. 30 miles, 40 miles. Places my parents had never heard of in towns they had probably never even visited. I told myself distance would solve everything. If I went far enough away, their reach would finally end. I was wrong about that too. The restaurant was in Granton, 35 miles south. It was a family place with checkered tablecloths and daily specials written on a whiteboard near the door. They needed a hostess. I applied online at the public library and got an interview that same week. I borrowed a blouse from another shelter resident and took the county bus at 6 a.m. The manager's name was Dave. He seemed decent. Enough. He shook my hand and said they would let me know by Friday. Thursday morning, Dave called. I answered on the first ring. "Caroline, I'm sorry," he said. "We've decided to go in a different direction." My stomach dropped immediately. "Can I ask why?" There was a pause. A long one. "Someone emailed us a document," he said slowly. It looked like a police report. I sat down on my shelter bed. A police report. It wasn't a phone call this time. No. This time it was an email with an attachment. It looked official. A document typed and formatted, sent from an anonymous email to a restaurant 35 miles away. My father had spent 19 years working as a plant manager. He knew how to write formal memos. He knew how to format official-looking paperwork. He had a printer, a scanner, an old company letterhead that looked close enough to something real if you didn't examine it too carefully. They had upgraded their strategy. Phone calls were no longer enough. Now there were documents. Fabricated. Evidence designed to look like something a background check might reveal. That evening, sitting on bed 14, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, but I knew the rhythm. Still cold out there? Doors still open for now. I stared at that message for a long time before deleting it, but something else stayed with me that night. Something Linda had mentioned 2 days earlier. A woman had come to the shelter asking about me. A woman I didn't know at all. She had left a business card. I hadn't thought much about it then, but now I couldn't stop thinking about it. He called on a Sunday afternoon. I don't know why I answered. Maybe because it was raining and the shelter roof was leaking over bed 12 and I was tired in a way sleep never fixes. "Come home, Caroline. Stop calling my employers." "I don't know what you mean," he said calmly. "I've seen the notebook, Dad." "What notebook?" "Mom's notebook, the one with the check marks." Silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. I could hear the kitchen, faucet running in the background. The same faucet that had been dripping for 3 years because he never fixed it. "You're confused," he said finally. "You've always been confused. I'm not confused. I'm unemployable because of you. You're unemployable because you're not ready for the real world. That's what I've been trying to teach you. I'm hanging up now. If you hang up, you lose this family forever. I already lost it." I pressed the red button and set the phone face down on the mattress, but my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the effort of keeping my voice steady for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I didn't call back. He didn't call again. From that moment forward, it was only text messages. Once a week, sometimes twice, always the same. Tone. A door held open just enough to remind me it could close at any moment. "Thanksgiving is coming. Your mom is making pie. Saw your friend Katie at the store. She asked about you. Getting cold out there?" The shelter can't be warm this time of year. Each message was like a small fish hook. And every one of them was designed to make me feel like the problem was mine. Like I was the one who left. The one who broke the family. The one who needed to come crawling back. I saved every text message. I didn't know yet what I would do with them. But something in my mind said, keep everything. It was probably the smartest thing I did that entire year. After I hung up that phone call, I sat on my shelter bed staring at the ceiling for a long time. I kept asking myself the same question again and again. Why? Why would your own parents rather see you homeless than independent? I still don't fully have an answer to that question. But I want to ask you something. Have your parents ever destroyed an opportunity for you and then acted like they were doing you a favor? If that question feels close to home, I would honestly love to hear your story. During the quiet nights at the shelter, and they were always quiet except for the hum of the baseboard heater and someone coughing 2 beds away, I thought a lot about my grandmother, Margaret Johansson. Everyone called her Maggie. She used to live on a 40-acre farm outside Ridgeway, about 40 minutes from Harland. Chickens, a half-acre garden, and a barn she painted white every spring because she said it kept things honest. She sold the farm 3 years before she died. I was 23 when she passed away. Heart failure, quick and sudden, the way she probably would have wanted. At the funeral, my dad cried exactly once during the eulogy and then went back to shaking hands and accepting casseroles from neighbors. But I kept thinking about the last time I saw her alone. It was maybe a year before she died. She invited me out to the farm. The new owners hadn't moved in yet, so she still had access to the house. We sat on the porch drinking sweet tea, and she said something I didn't understand at the time. If things ever get really bad, someone will come find you. Don't be scared when they do. I remember laughing and saying, "Grandma, what are you talking about?" But she didn't laugh. She just looked out across the field and said softly, "I know my son, sweetheart. I've known him for 50 years. Then she changed the subject and asked about the garden at home and whether the tomatoes had started growing yet. But there was one more thing she said as I was walking to my car. "I sold the farm, but I didn't spend the money. Remember that." At the time, I didn't remember it at all. Not until month 5 at the shelter, lying on bed 14 and staring at a water stain on the ceiling shaped like the state of Ohio. Then suddenly I remembered every single word she had said. It was Linda who mentioned it again. I was restocking the supply closet. Toilet paper stacked on the left shelf, cleaning spray on the right side. And that's when she said something that made my heart stop for a moment. A woman came by again, today asking about you. She said she might come back soon, and this time she sounded serious. The kind of mindless work that keeps your hands busy when your head refuses to slow down. And she leaned against the door frame with that expression she had when she was carefully choosing the right words. "Caroline, do you remember that woman who came by last month?" I stopped moving for a second. "The one asking about me?" "Yeah. Ruth something. I didn't give her your information, shelter policy. But she left a card." Linda pulled it from her back pocket, slightly bent at the corner, like it had been carried around for a while. She handed it to me. "Ruth Callan, licensed private investigator. State of Ohio, license number PI 214774550182. I read it twice slowly. Private investigator. My first thought was the obvious one. My dad hired someone to find me. This was his next step. Track me down, report my location, maybe try to get me removed from the shelter with some fake complaint. "What did she look like?" I asked. 50s, maybe. Short gray hair, calm voice, very polite. Linda paused before continuing. "She didn't seem like trouble, Caroline. Honestly, she seemed like someone trying to locate a person she actually cared about." I slipped the card into my pocket. I didn't call the number. I wasn't ready to walk straight into whatever trap my father had set next. I had already been outplayed too many times. But the card stayed in my pocket. And every time I did laundry, I moved it into the clean pair of jeans. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Something about it kept bothering me. The way she came to the shelter in person instead of just calling. The way she left her real name instead of hiding behind some anonymous message. That wasn't how my parents operated. They hid behind things. They lied. They sent messages from the shadows. This woman knocked on the front door. Month 7. I was finally starting to get some stability under my feet. My replacement birth certificate had arrived in the mail, and the DMV had finally processed my temporary ID. For the first time in my adult life, I had a government card with my own face on it. A small victory, but it felt huge to me. Then Linda called me into her office. She was sitting behind her desk with the door closed. That never happened. Linda's door was always propped open with a brick she had painted blue. "Sit down," she said. Not unkind, but serious. "I got a call today. A woman identifying herself as a social worker. She said you have a documented history of violence and that you pose a risk to other residents." The room suddenly felt colder. That was my mother. Linda nodded slowly. "I figured. I've worked here 11 years. Social workers don't randomly call shelters to trash a resident. That's not how the system works." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I couldn't discuss resident information." Then she hung up. Linda leaned forward slightly. "I'm documenting this call in our records. But I need to be honest with you. If she contacts the county office, if she files a formal complaint through the system, I may not be able to protect your spot here. That decision would be above me." I just sat there quietly. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The baseboard heater clicked softly against the wall. My parents had sabotaged my job applications. They had created fake police reports. They had drained my bank account and kept my identity documents. And now they were trying to take away the one place I could sleep safely at night. Then something changed inside me at that moment. It wasn't anger. Anger is loud and messy and it burns out quickly. This was something different. This was clear. Like a window someone had been smearing with grease for years, and suddenly I had wiped it clean. I was done being scared. I was ready to be precise. Harland holds a town council meeting on the first Thursday of every month. Folding chairs in the community center, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and a microphone on a podium that squeals if you stand too close. Maybe 15 to 40 people show up depending on whether there's a zoning issue or a pothole complaint. Most of the time it's the same dozen retirees and one guy who has been trying to get a stop sign on Elm Street for 3 years. Linda told me word travels fast in a town this small. "Your dad signed up to speak tonight," she said. I went. I sat in the last row near the exit wearing a borrowed jacket. I hadn't been in a public space in Harlan since the night I left. Gerald stood at the podium at exactly 7:22 p.m. He was wearing his good shirt, the blue one Denise ironed for funerals and bank meetings. His voice cracked on the first sentence, and I immediately knew it was rehearsed. "I'm here as a father," he said. "My daughter left home and fell into bad company. She's living in a shelter. I've tried to bring her home, but she refuses." He paused, letting the silence do the work. A woman in the second row covered her mouth with her hand. "I'm asking this community to help me reach my little girl." In the front row, Denise sat with her hands folded in her lap, tears running down her face. The woman beside her, Mrs. Patterson, from the post office, reached over and gently squeezed her arm. People started turning to look at me. I could feel it. 40 pairs of eyes. Some full of pity, some curious, some already convinced. The man at the podium was a heartbroken father. The girl sitting quietly in the back row was the problem. Nobody asked me if I wanted to speak. The meeting simply moved on to the next item. I didn't say a word. I took out a notebook and wrote down everything my father had said, word for word. Then I quietly left through the side door. After that meeting, Harland made its decision about me. The grocery store where I had asked about part-time stocking, the manager's wife had been at the meeting. Position filled. The gas station attendant, who used to nod at me, now looked past me when I came in. One of the volunteers, a retired teacher named Barb, pulled me aside during lunch one day. "Honey, maybe you should just go home. Your daddy's heartbroken." I set my spoon down slowly. "Did you hear his speech?" "Everyone heard it," she said softly. "That poor man standing up there begging for his little girl to come home." I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show her the texts. "Come home. Apologize. I'll think about it." I wanted to describe the blue notebook with the red check marks, the fake police report, the phone call to the shelter claiming I was violent. But I didn't, because I had learned something during those 7 months. When your accuser cries in public, nobody listens to the accused. A few days later, someone from a local congregation called the shelter. Not from any specific church, just a concerned member of the faith community suggesting a family reconciliation meeting. Linda politely declined on my behalf. The walls were slowly closing in. My parents had turned the entire town into their surveillance system. Every sympathetic neighbor, every well-meaning volunteer, every person who saw Gerald's trembling lip at that podium, they all became extensions of the trap. But I kept thinking about something my grandmother once said, "Someone will come find you." And I kept thinking about the business card still sitting in my pocket. Ruth Kalin, private investigator. I realized I had nothing left to lose. The shelter was the last wall between me and the street. That night, I took the card out and called the number. She came the next morning at exactly 8 a.m., and Linda let her in. Ruth Kalin looked exactly like Linda had described. Mid-50s, short gray hair, no jewelry, no nonsense attitude. She wore a simple navy jacket and carried a brown leather briefcase that looked older than I was. She sat down on the folding chair beside my bed. The shelter was mostly empty that morning. Everyone else was at the day center or out searching for work. "Caroline Johansson?" she asked. "That's me." She set the briefcase on the bed between us. On the leather, written in faded black ink, was handwriting I recognized immediately. 5 simple words. "For Caroline. When she's ready." My grandmother's handwriting. The air left my lungs. "My name is Ruth Kalin. I'm a licensed private investigator in the state of Ohio. Your grandmother Margaret hired me 10 years ago." 10 years? I would have been 18. She paid me a retainer up front for a decade of periodic surveillance on your parents. Her instructions were very specific. Ruth paused for a moment. "And give her this when the time comes." "How did you know it?" "Was bad enough?" I asked quietly. Ruth looked at me steadily. "When your mother called the shelter pretending to be a social worker, I was already monitoring the situation. I've been tracking the calls to employers for 2 years. I have records of 37 separate contacts your mother made. I also have copies of the fabricated documents your father created. I have everything." I stared down at the briefcase and at my grandmother's handwriting, a decade of planning. An old woman sitting on a farm she had already sold, looking 10 years into the future and seeing exactly what would happen. "She predicted this," Ruth said quietly, "almost to the exact year." I slowly reached forward and touched the metal clasp. Inside, on top, was a sealed envelope. Cream-colored. My name written in Grandma Maggie's handwriting, the same careful cursive she always used on birthday cards and Christmas envelopes. Reading this means things have gotten bad. I paused for a moment. Then I kept reading. "If you're reading this, things have gotten bad. I'm sorry I couldn't stop your father while I was still alive. I tried. I spent 30 years married to a man just like him, your grandfather. I know how the walls slowly close in around you. I know how they make you believe the cage is normal life. But I spent my final years making sure you wouldn't be trapped, forever. Inside this case is your way out. Use it wisely. Don't use it for revenge. Use it for freedom. I love you more than he ever allowed me to show. Grandma Maggie." I set the letter down on the bed. My hands were steady, but my eyes were not. Ruth waited quietly. Then she opened a second compartment in the briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. She placed it on the bed and opened it slowly. 5 years of documentation, everything organized by date, tabs separating each section, recordings of Denise's phone calls, 37 of them. In the recordings, she identified herself in different ways: a concerned neighbor, a worried family friend, and in 2 cases, even a social worker. Each recording had a date stamp, the phone number used, and a full transcription. Copies of emails sent from anonymous accounts traced back to the Johansson household IP address. Each email contained attachments designed to look like official police reports. Ruth had screenshots, metadata, timestamps, photographs of the blue. notebook, the one with the red check marks. They had been taken through the Johansson kitchen window during one of Ruth's surveillance visits. I looked up at her. "Is this admissible in court?" "Every bit of it," she said calmly. "Ohio is a one-party consent state for recordings. I was hired as a licensed private investigator. My documentation follows chain of custody procedures. I closed the folder, then opened it again, then closed it once more." "There's one more thing," Ruth said. At the bottom of the briefcase beneath the folder was a large yellow envelope. It was sealed with a wax stamp. Not decorative, just practical, the kind lawyers sometimes use. In the upper corner it read, "Law Office of Philip Dern, Millfield, Ohio." I slid my finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a stack of legal documents, clipped together and marked with blue tabs. Ruth spoke while I read. "Your grandmother sold her farm 10 years ago for just under $300,000. She placed the money into a revocable trust that became irrevocable after her death. The trust has been managed conservatively since then. Certificates of deposit, treasury bonds, managed by a fiduciary through Mr. Dern's office." I looked at the number on the summary page. Then I looked again. $340,000. "The sole beneficiary," Ruth continued, "is you, Caroline Johansson. No other names appear. Your father has no knowledge of this trust. Your grandmother was very clear about that. She instructed Mr. Dern to have absolutely no contact with Gerald or Denise under any circumstances." I slowly placed the papers on the bed. The shelter mattress sagged beneath the weight of them. Or maybe it was the weight of everything finally catching up to me. "Why didn't she just give it to me before?" I asked quietly. "She wrote a note to Mr. Dern about that," Ruth said. I'm paraphrasing, but the meaning was clear. "If I give it to her now, Gerald will find a way to take it. She has to need it first." I looked again at my grandmother's handwriting on the briefcase. "For Caroline. When she's ready." "To access the funds," Ruth continued, "you'll need to visit Mr. Dern in person with valid identification. A birth certificate or a state-issued ID will work." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the temporary ID I had gotten from the DMV 2 weeks earlier. The one I had fought 3 months to get. It was the right time. She had planned for everything. Philip Dern's office was located above, a hardware store in downtown Millfield. A narrow staircase led up to a glass door with gold lettering. Inside was a small waiting room with 2 chairs and a fern that had clearly seen better decades. Ruth drove me there. I wore the only clean outfit I owned: jeans, a white blouse borrowed from Linda, shoes I had bought from a thrift store for $4. Dern was 64, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when I walked in and shook my hand with both of his. "Your grandmother talked about you constantly," he said kindly. "Please sit down." He verified my ID and checked the birth certificate I had received through the mail. He cross-referenced my social security number through a secure system. Everything matched. Everything was in order. "The trust is active," he said finally. "You have full access to the funds as of today." He slid a document across the desk. I signed it. My hand did not shake. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Your grandmother also left instructions for me. She wrote, 'Caroline might need a lawyer before she needs the money.'" He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "She asked me to refer you to someone if needed, a litigator." He handed the card to me. Ellen Briggs, civil litigation, defamation and harassment cases, based in Millfield. I took the card and looked at it. Then I looked back at Dern. Did my grandmother plan this too? "She planned for the possibility," he said. "She hoped it wouldn't come to this." "I took the liberty of calling her this morning. She can see you at 2 o'clock today." I called Ellen Briggs at 1:45. I was sitting in her office by 2:10. By 3:30, she had reviewed Ruth's entire evidence file. Every recording, every fabricated document, every red checkmark from that blue notebook. Her exact words were simple: "This is defamation per se. In Ohio, falsely stating someone has a criminal record is automatically actionable. You don't even need to prove damages. But in your case, we have damages anyway. 3 years of them. She filed the lawsuit that same week. Gerald Johansson was served on a Monday morning at 8:15 a.m. A process server walked up the driveway while Gerald was checking the mailbox. Mrs. Patterson from the post office was watering her azaleas 2 doors down. She saw everything. The envelope. Gerald's expression. The way he stood in the driveway reading the first page without moving for almost a full minute. Denise was served separately 1 hour later at the Harland Fresh Mart. She was standing in the cereal aisle. 3 people she knew from her cooking group were in the store at the time. By noon, half of Harland had heard the news. By dinner, the other half knew too. Gerald called my phone 14 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. Ellen had advised. Me, clearly. All communication goes through legal counsel now. At 6:47 p.m., a text message came through. You're going to regret this. I'm your father. Ellen logged it immediately. Exhibit 47. The next day, Denise began her campaign. She called 5 neighbors in one afternoon. Through tears, always tears, she told each one the same story. My daughter is suing me because I loved her too much. But something had changed. The lawsuit was filed in county court, and court records in Ohio are public. People in small towns read court records the same way they read the church bulletin, carefully and completely. By the end of the week, someone at the diner had pulled up the complaint online. The summary was there in plain black and white. Fabricated police reports, impersonation of a social worker, 37 documented calls to employers across a 3-year period. For the first time, someone asked Denise a question she wasn't ready for. It was Tom Adler, Gerald's neighbor for 30 years. He ran into her at the gas station. Denise, is it true you called her employers? She didn't answer. She got into her car and drove away. Gerald signed up to speak at the next town council meeting. Of course he did. The podium had worked once. Before. He believed it would work again. But this time the room was packed. 60 people at least. Maybe more. Folding chairs pulled from the storage closet. Others standing along the back wall. This wasn't about potholes anymore. I sat in the 3rd row. Not the back row this time. The 3rd row. Ellen Briggs sat beside me with a legal pad on her lap and a pen in her hand. She wore a gray blazer and an expression that revealed absolutely nothing. Gerald walked to the podium at 7:15 p.m. Most of you know me, he began. I've lived in Harlan my whole life. I coached Little League. I served on the planning committee. And now my own daughter is trying to destroy this family with a frivolous lawsuit. He gripped the sides of the podium tightly. She's been influenced by outsiders, lawyers, people who don't understand this family. I'm asking this community to stand with me. He looked directly at me. I looked back and didn't flinch. The room was silent. Then Ellen stood up slowly. My name is Ellen Briggs. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of Ohio, and I represent Caroline Johansson. The case has been filed in county court. The complaint and all supporting evidence are part of the public record. I would encourage anyone here who is curious to review those documents rather than relying on one person's version of events. Then she sat back down. No drama, no accusations, no raised voice. The room remained completely silent for 8 full seconds. I counted. Then the council chair cleared his throat softly and moved on to the next item on the agenda. Gerald stood at the podium for another moment, almost like he was unsure what to do next. Then he slowly stepped down and sat in his chair. He didn't look at me again. The court approved the civil protection order 11 days later, 500 feet, no direct contact, no contact through other people, no phone calls, no text messages, no letters, no emails. No messages passed through neighbors, friends, or anyone else. Nothing. Gerald broke that order within the first week. He borrowed his neighbor's phone, a man named Dale who honestly had no idea what was happening, and sent me a message. This isn't over, Caroline. Ellen documented the message immediately and filed it with the court. Gerald received an official warning from the judge. One more violation, and he would be facing contempt charges. The defamation case continued to move forward. Ellen submitted Ruth's full evidence package, the recordings, the phone logs, the fake documents, the metadata that linked the anonymous emails directly back to the Johansson household. 37 calls, 5 forged police reports, 3 full years of systematic interference with my ability to find and keep a job. Gerald hired a lawyer, a low-cost attorney from 2 counties away who looked like he would rather be doing almost anything else. After he reviewed the evidence, he called Ellen and recommended a settlement. Gerald refused. "I'm not settling with my own daughter." His attorney withdrew from the case the next week. Gerald never hired another one. Meanwhile, the court records were doing their quiet work. In Harland, public documents quickly become public conversations. People read them. People talk about them. Did you see the part about the social worker call? She made 37 calls. Gerald faked a police report. The name Gerald Johansson started being spoken in places where it hadn't been questioned before. At the Harland Diner, where I used to clear tables when I was 14, the cook mentioned it to one of the regular customers. That girl applied. "Here once," he said quietly. I turned her away because of a phone call. I feel sick about it now. The truth doesn't really need a podium or a microphone. It just needs to be available for people to see. Slowly at first, and then almost all at once, Harland started paying attention. Denise was the first person to feel the change. The Thursday Cooking Circle, a group of 8 women who had been meeting at each other's homes for 15 years, sent her a message through the group organizer. "We think it might be best if you take a break for now, Denise, just until things calm down." Things were not going to calm down. Then Gerald went to the coffee shop on Main Street. It had been his routine for 20 years. Same booth, same coffee, same newspaper. The booth was empty, not occupied, just empty. People simply weren't sitting there. He took a small table near the window instead. No one came to join him. The waitress refilled his coffee but avoided eye contact the entire time. Tom Adler, his neighbor, the same one who had asked Denise a question at the gas station, came to the house one evening. "Jerry, I've known you for 30 years. Gerald stood in the doorway with one hand on the doorframe. Tom hesitated for a second. "Did you really fake a police report?" Gerald closed the door in his face without saying a single word. On the legal side, things began to move faster. Dave, the restaurant manager in Granton who had canceled my interview after receiving the fake police report, contacted Ellen's office on his own. No one had asked him to. He said he was willing to testify. He still had the email saved in his inbox with the forged document attached. Bill from the Millfield hardware store also came forward. He had written down a note about the suspicious phone call in his hiring file. He remembered the exact date. He remembered the voice. I didn't organize any of this. I didn't call people. I didn't post anything online. I didn't go door to door explaining my story. I didn't have to. The evidence already existed. The court documents were public, and the people of Harlan, despite all their flaws, were capable of reading. The town didn't turn against Gerald because I told them to. They turned because the story stopped making sense. Then Gerald didn't show up to court. After his attorney withdrew, he represented himself for exactly one filing, a handwritten response. That said, in full, this is a family matter and the court has no jurisdiction over a father's right to protect his child. The judge did not agree. When Gerald failed to appear for the next hearing, Ellen filed a motion for a default judgment. The court granted it. Defamation per se. Tortious interference with prospective employment. Documented damages. $85,000. The amount was calculated from 3 years of lost income and clearly recorded harm. Gerald didn't pay. Ellen filed a lien against the Johansson house. I was sitting in Philip Dern's office when the judgment notice came through. He printed it and handed the paper to me across the same desk where I had signed the trust documents 2 months earlier. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired," I said, and I truly meant it. That same week, Dern offered me a job, not out of sympathy or charity. He had been watching the way I organized Ruth's evidence files, built timelines, and cross-referenced dates. "I need an administrative assistant," he said, "and you're the most organized person I've seen in 40 years of practice." I started the following Monday, $16.50 an hour, benefits after 60 days. A small desk beside a window with a fern that needed watering every few days. Using some of the trust money, I rented a one-bedroom apartment in Millfield. Ground floor, small kitchen, a front door with a lock, and a key that belonged only to me. I bought a used Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. I opened a bank account with just my name on it. For the first time in my life, I went grocery shopping without asking anyone's permission. The apartment was quiet. No one asked where I was going. No one checked my email. No one called my workplace pretending to be someone else. The quiet was the loudest thing I had ever experienced. When I sat in that courtroom and the judge read the ruling, I didn't feel happy. I felt exhausted. 3 years of my life gone. 8 months sleeping in a shelter bed. All because my parents would rather destroy my future than allow me to leave. Let me ask you something honestly. If your parents had created fake police reports to stop you from getting a job, would you have sued them? Or would you have simply walked away? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to hear what people think. 3 months after the judgment, a letter arrived at the shelter. Linda forwarded it to me because Denise had mailed it to my old address, not my new one. Technically, it was a gray area in the protection order, but it still violated the spirit of it. I opened the envelope at my kitchen table. The letter said, "Dear Caroline, I'm your mother. I will always be your mother. Your father says he is sorry. Come have Thanksgiving dinner with us. We can put this behind us." I read it once, then again, then a third time. Dad says he's sorry. Not, Dad is sorry, just says, like she was reporting the weather. We can put this behind us. Not, I was wrong. Not, I should not have called your employers 37 times. Not, I forged documents to make sure you couldn't get hired. Just a simple sentence like we were arguing about the thermostat. I sat with the letter for an hour. I made coffee. I fed my cat, a small tabby I had adopted from the Millfield shelter. I named her Maggie because honestly it just felt right. Then I wrote a response through Ellen, exactly as the protection order required. Mom, I wish you well. But love does not include sabotaging your child's ability to survive. You called my employers. You pretended to be a social worker. You tried to get me removed from the only place I had to sleep. Please respect the court. Order. Do not contact me again. Caroline. I sealed the envelope and put a stamp on it. Then I drove to the post office in Millfield, not the one in Harland where Mrs. Patterson might see me and pass the news along. After that, I went home. My home. I cooked dinner for one person, pasta, garlic bread, and a glass of water. Maggie sat on the counter watching me while I ate. It was the best meal I had ever had. I'm not telling this story so people will hate my parents. I'm telling it because somewhere right now, someone is lying in a bed that doesn't belong. To them, staring at a ceiling they can't paint. Wondering if wanting their own life makes them a bad daughter or a bad son. It doesn't. Wanting to work is not betrayal. Wanting independence is not disrespect. And walking away from people who are actively ruining your life is not cruelty. It is survival. My grandmother could not save herself. She spent 30 years, married to a man who controlled everything in her life, where she went, who she talked to, what she was allowed to want. By the time she finally got free, she was 70 years old and living in a rented apartment with nothing except the money from a sold farm and a plan, but she saved me. She planned it 10 years in advance. She hired a private investigator. She created a trust. She wrote a letter and sealed it inside a briefcase, hoping I would never need to open it. That is what real love looks like. not control, disguised as concern. Not sabotage pretending to be protection. Real love prepares you to live your own life, even if that life takes you far away. Love makes a plan for your freedom, even when it costs almost everything. I'm 28 now. I work as an administrative assistant in a small law office in Millfield. I'm slowly saving money so I can start community college. I have a 1-bedroom apartment, a used Honda, and a cat named Maggie who sheds fur on almost everything I own. And I don't talk to my parents anymore. I haven't locked that door forever, but the key belongs to me now. They don't get to decide when it opens. Grandma Maggie wrote something in the letter she left for me. One line that I still think about almost every day. Freedom isn't free, but you're worth every penny. She was right. Gerald eventually sold the house. He didn't really have a choice. The lien Ellen filed meant the court judgment had to be paid before the property could legally change owners. Gerald couldn't afford to pay $85,000 out of pocket, so the house had to go. The house on Maple Street, the one where I grew up. The one with the old porch where he used to sit every morning reading his newspaper, while pretending he had no idea what his wife was doing behind the scenes. The house sold for $168,000. After the lien payment, the real estate fees, and the back taxes Gerald had quietly ignored for years, he walked away with barely enough money to start over somewhere else. He and Denise moved to a trailer park outside of Galleon, about 20 minutes from Harland. Close enough to still shop at the Fresh Mart grocery store, but far enough away that they stopped running into people who used to smile and wave. Gerald never admitted he was wrong, not once. Not in court, not to the town, not to anyone. Instead, he told his new neighbors the same story he had told the town council. My daughter was brainwashed by a lawyer. He'll probably keep telling that story for the rest of his life. Some people would rather lose everything they have than admit that they were the villain in someone else's story. But Denise did something I honestly didn't expect. I didn't learn about it right away. Ruth told me months later during one of our occasional phone calls, Denise had started seeing a therapist. She went on her own. And she didn't tell Gerald. According to Ruth, during the 3rd session, Denise finally said something out loud that she had never said before. I think I did something terrible. Then she said, I don't know what to do with that. When Ruth told me that, I didn't know how to react. I'm not ready to forgive her. Maybe I never will be. But I've learned something important over the last few years. It is possible to hold 2 truths in your mind at the same time. Denise is the woman who called 37 employers and lied about her own daughter. And Denise is also the woman who finally sat in a quiet room and admitted the truth to another human being. Both of those things can exist at the same time. People are complicated, even the ones who hurt you the most. But complicated does not mean they are entitled to return to your life. Healing does not require reconciliation. Sometimes healing simply requires distance. That's my story. If you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. I really mean that. Not everyone has a grandmother who quietly plans 10 years ahead to protect them. Not everyone has someone who leaves behind a map to freedom. But everyone deserves to know something very simple. Wanting independence is not betrayal. Wanting to build your own life does not make you selfish. And walking away from people who are actively destroying your future is not cruelty. Sometimes it is the bravest and healthiest choice you can make. Somewhere right now, there is someone lying in a room that doesn't belong to them, wondering if they are a bad daughter or a bad son for wanting their own life. They're not. They're just human. And if this story reminded you of someone you know, please consider sending it to them. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can hear is that they are not alone. Sometimes one story is enough to help someone realize they're not crazy for wanting freedom. If this story connected with you, hit the like button so more people can find it. If you want to hear more real stories like this, you can subscribe and stay with the channel. And if you're curious about what happened later, there is one more chapter I haven't told yet. 6 months after everything was over, Denise showed up at my workplace, unannounced. That story is waiting for you in the description below. I'll see you there.